approval, which is what currently happens with the process with the airport. We've raised objections to that, both to the Minister and at other opportunities, but that's the way the legislation is written. It is the owners of the airport that are responsible for carrying out the process and evaluating any submissions they receive, and then they forward them on to the Minister, and the Minister makes a final determination. But we think the system is flawed, and I certainly would support any change to that. In relation to the noise abatement zones, those noise abatement zones, so far as I'm concerned, appear to work okay. And I think one of the big issues with that is that quite often we've found that aircrafts coming in or taking off are not complying with the designated routes that they're supposed to be on. And we've noticed that over Queanbeyan. I happen to live right in the centre of Queanbeyan, which is certainly nowhere near the approaches in or out of the airport. But on quite regular occasions, we see particularly Dash 8s fly over the top of our house, which is quite a few kilometres from the approaches to the main runway. So I can't see that the noise abatement zones are a real issue. We've made decisions on the council that we would not support any changes to the approaches in and out of the airport. But we do have a very strong view about night operation of the airport.
Jochen?
Maybe following on to this, I have a question to Frank first, and then the other candidates, if they care to show their opinions on this. The situation is this: with the privatization of the airport has ceased to be a piece of infrastructure servicing the community. And what we see is now that the airport sees opportunities in growth, whereby the numbers for that growth are not scrutinized by anybody, but they are used to lock into place in Canberra a planning regime that will allow the potential for that growth. What we also know is that growth will interfere severely with the living standards of large areas of residencies across the region, not only in Canberra. So the question is, what political instruments do you see, what political responsibilities do you see to change this situation that development is being allowed now that is known to affect citizens in a city that is still a livable city and a region that is still a livable region and is sold as that? And we know that it's going to be destroying that basis of life in Canberra. What political strategies do you see to cope with this situation?
So, Frank?
Well, I guess the only weapon at my disposal would be to express a very strong view and strong opposition to any proposal to have a 24-hour operational airport without curfew, and try and assert as much, pressure on firstly the ACT government, and then through that avenue to the federal counterparts to ensure that the future amenity of the residents of the ACT are protected. But I guess I'd have to be honest and say that the horse is probably just about outside the gate by now.
What about, so Jochen's asked the question of the other three political candidates. Who would like to go first?
Well, like I say, I've lived in a lot of places around the world, and I bring certain views here to Canberra that I don't want to repeat or see Canberra repeat mistakes that were made elsewhere. So that's the opinions I would be taking in if I were elected. I would take that vote to caucus and to the assembly and to government. So I would definitely take, I definitely think that, as Jochen said, that you just can't have just unrestrained development, that you've got to think about community values, because once you've lost, those community values, you aren't going to get them back. So I think I would fight very, very hard to maintain those community values. You can count on me for that.
Does that mean curfew?
Yes.
I'll stand up. First of all, as Deb mentioned, the Greens have made an extensive submission on this already. So if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm sure we can provide it. The Greens state very clearly there that we would support a curfew. And I think we come at this from a number of angles, which would also include the rapid expansion of the airline industry generally and the impact that that's having on greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's not so much a quality of life issue, but it's certainly a big picture issue that we're very concerned about as well. I think in terms of political moves, I'd be slightly less pessimistic. I'm a campaigner from way back. I spent the last couple of years trying to stop the Japanese whaling, and that seemed like an impenetrable cause, and we are making progress. We would obviously campaign a number of different ways, but we'd also work very closely with our colleagues in the Senate, particularly once they hold the balance of power, to put as much pressure as we can on the federal parliament as well.
I may as well stand up as well. The Community Alliance doesn't actually have a considered opinion on this, that's why I'm here. I'd be selling ourselves short if we said we would actually pick the side at this stage. You know, what I find really difficult about this particular situation is the fact that we're not talking about a triple bottom line approach, trying to actually get a good compromise for business, for the environment, and socially for the people. I really don't think the needs of the residents of Canberra are 100% against the needs of the airport, and I don't think there needs to be as much conflict as looks like is shaping up. I tend to be fairly dubious about the political process myself. Some of you guys know I was a Democrat. And the Greens aren't going to hold the balance of power. Unfortunately, it's going to be very much up to two individuals, mainly in the Senate. And I think it's not a brilliant situation that we're in, and hopefully the Greens will do their bit, though. It's, I mean, in the end, we've got to... I think the way forward is not to actually make it into a conflict, is to actually try and get work with the airport, work with other groups that are involved in this particular issue, and actually try and get a compromise without having to slug this one out. Because I think the cards are very much in the hands of people that are outside this room, and those people don't really have Canberra's best interests at heart because they don't live here. So I'll have to say that I'm not going to put my cards either way at this stage, because I'm uninformed at this particular stage, and I think an uninformed politician is more dangerous than a regular politician. So I'll reserve my position for now, but before the election comes out, you'll definitely know my position. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
But, you can't compromise. You're going to have to front these people. I've lived through it. For 30 years in Perth. I've never heard of a curfew being introduced in Perth, and I only left 8 months ago. It's a nightmare. These people will do it if you lot let them. It's not a fact of dealing with them or compromising with them or being nice to each other. It won't work. You'll have jumbos over the top of your house. There's no ifs or buts. I know you might think I'm being radical, but I'm not. You've got to stop these guys. Now, why Australia has airports in its cities got me stuck with all the land it's got.
All right. Okay, thank you. I think Petra's...
No, my question has been asked. Thanks.
All right. Are there any further questions from the floor? Someone who hasn't asked a question? Terry and then Shane and then Tom, is that right?
Just to Frank, do you think the airport's moved from
being a community facility.